Special episode today. Last time we finished off, Sam, with talking about money and money mindset and all those sort of things. The rubber's going to hit the road a little bit with our first live coaching session. What is somebody who's one of your clients? Now, we are not going to say names and practice names because we've got to get into the nitty gritty. But I do think this is such a relevant topic, possibly the most. I'm dying to see what you do with it. I have to give a background story, Sam. I was in a virtual room with a bunch of really top level business owners, and we were trying to get into the stuff that keeps you up at night as a business owner. And almost without fail, across the board, it was rising wages, shrinking revenue from less discretionary income. So I'd love to see where we go with this. Sam, welcome back. I'm Hubert Timstra, veterinarian, former business owner, and your host here at the Veterinary Business Accelerator, the show for practice owners who want to build profitable businesses that don't consume their lives. And guiding us again is Dr. Sam Bowden, veterinarian, author, and the founder of the Accelerate Practice Academy. Sam has worked with hundreds of vet practice owners to help them find clarity, reclaim their time, and create businesses that serve their lives, not the other way around. And in this special episode, you will hear a raw, real coaching call with a practice owner client of Sam's dealing with a pain point almost every clinic faces: sky-high wages and low margins. Together we break down why cutting hours or raising fees isn't enough, and how to reshape pricing, productivity, and team structure to get your margins back on track. No theory, no fluff, just honest numbers and a raw practical breakdown of the problem. If you've ever felt stuck between paying your team fairly and keeping your business profitable, this one is for you. Okay, let's get to work.
Well, thank you so much for jumping in and sharing with your practice. Just tell us a little bit, style of practice and what sort of size turnover, those sort of things.
Okay, we run a mixed practice in country South Australia. We have a lot of part-time employees, which I think is the way of the veterinary world these days. Like, we have a lot of mums and we're pretty family focused. Had the business about 18 years now, and our turnover sits at about 2.5 million a year. One of the things we've struggled with is getting our wage percentage to a decent level. So yeah, that's something I'm really interested in digging deeper into.
Hey, quick interruption. As we move through this conversation, you'll hear a lot of business terms. And if you're like me, you might not be 100% clear on what each one of them means. So I asked Sam to clarify some of these concepts, kind of a business speak 101, and added it right at the end of this episode. If you are all over how to work out percentages of profit and COGS and all of that stuff, then you probably don't need it. Although there is a very interesting little detour on outsourcing your drug sales to online pharmacies instead of selling meds in-house. You'll find this section in the last 10 minutes or so of the podcast. Skip ahead and listen to that first if you need to, or otherwise just sit tight. All will be explained eventually. Okay, back to Sam.
So let's jump in. And when we talk wages, I think what can happen is people think my wages are too high, I got to run around and start firing people. And maybe that is the case, but in a lot of the times we need to dig a bit deeper and understand, well, if you're busy, why are wages high? So let's break this down for listeners that we're definitely going to try and walk away with some strategies to use and areas of focus. But two, for those listening on, if your wages are high, what you going to do about it? So let's just give a little bit of context. Where do we want wages to sit as a percentage? Ideally, our target is 38%. Inclusive of superannuation. So we'll accept up to a 42% inclusive of superannuation. Of course, Victoria, you guys get slapped with another lovely little tax on top of that. So you just need to take that into account. So when we start seeing wages that are creeping over 45, 48%, it's having a direct impact on the profit margin. So just jumping on and taking a look at the figures for we've got January and February. The wages of percentage is sitting at 62.5%. Does that ballpark sit where you'd have it in yours?
I think it does.
One of the things when we're looking at wages, we want to understand how's the rest of the business tracking. And one of the things we like to look at is have a look at the cost of goods sold, your COGS, because sometimes we'll see COGS are high as well, wages are high. What that tells us is it's just a general lack of knowledge on really running a business. Now I'm looking at your COGS for January, February, and we're sitting at 18%, which is, for a mixed practice, fantastic, like really dialed in. So you're obviously doing a lot of work really well in inventory, in stock control, in invoicing things out, not overuse and things like that. Would that be fair to say that you've had a good focus in that area?
Yeah, we've had a big focus on that in the last 12 months. I've got one staff member dedicated to that and it's going really well. We also utilise an online pharmacy for our scripting. So we have less long-term medications coming in, which means less time putting them up and dealing with them, less wastage, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, we're really happy with where our COGS are at.
Right. So we look at this and we go, okay, COGS are sitting in the right spot. The next thing we're going to take a look at is and go, how's the business comparing to last year? And by the way, for listeners, you're listening in, how do I know these figures so well? Well, when we're mentoring and working with practices, we have a dashboard and we can see single thing about a business, not only off the financial sheet, but also all the KPIs within the business. So it allows us to be very, very prescriptive in advice as to where the challenge is. And it's kind of like you're having a own blood test. You do a blood test on an animal. Why? Because your animal comes in and it's just sick. That's kind of, the client says, it's just not itself. And you're like, yeah, beauty, that really narrows it down for you, doesn't it? So we do a blood test in order to dial it in to go, which particular organ system do we need to start focusing on? Then we go deeper and deeper. So a dashboard is exactly the same.
Is it a blood test, Sam, or is it more like a rectal exam?
Well, the rectal exam comes if we find there's a problem. We think we need to go looking down there. So take a look at this. The second thing we're going to look at is our average transaction value. And your average transaction value, which is total turnover divided by number of invoices generated, you're sitting at 290, which is pretty good. To give you an idea, on average, we want to see that sitting at 250 or better. So I'm looking at this and going, okay, that's great. So it might be that you probably set your pricing right. Have you done some work on getting your pricing per unit set correctly?
Yeah, we've done quite a bit of work around our pricing again over the last few years, but I'm currently reviewing it. It's on my list to do this week because I look back and some of my prices have not increased in 12 months. So that's something that's really easy to slip. You just think, I've done it recently, and I actually haven't. So we are reviewing our pricing.
Yeah, little shout out to people. With pricing, once you've got it right, you need to set a date in your diary, in the calendar, that you are going to adjust it by at least CPI. So currently, what's CPI running at? About 3.7% or something like that. Your prices need to go up across the board by at least 3.7% a year, or you're going backwards. We would normally say go for 5% a year, and some people choose to split that into 2.5% every 6 months. But it needs to be, once you get your pricing right, we then need to have a system that means it stays right, and that's sort of just keeping up with CPI. Of course, then, your invoices from your suppliers and drugs and manufacturers, if they go up, you need to pass those forward.
Sorry, what's CPI? Sorry, Sam, I'm going to interrupt.
Consumer Price Index. So essentially the price that on average, the costs have gone up. And really, it's the devaluation of the dollar. The dollar buys 3.7% less than it did last year. So when we look at high wages, sometimes the reason we have high wages is because your pricing isn't set correctly. So your team might be charging along, doing really good work and being quite efficient. But if you don't have your prices set, it is impossible you'll have an artificially high wage because it's a percentage of your total turnover generated. So that's the first place you want to go look, and we have a look at average transaction value. Why do we have a look at average transaction value? It tells us two things. Number one, how's your pricing set? The second thing we want to look at is what are your standards of care, which is how consistently are your team recommending things that a pet ethically needs. We're going to take a look and start looking at your staff's actual performance. And what we want to dial into is see if we can find what's the general theme of why we've got high wages as a percentage. We've identified that your homework is going to be go and take a look at your pricing. What are you going to use? How are you going to do that? What's your strategy for assessing your pricing and how are you setting that?
So I use the BB Vet surveys that we populate every year and set ourselves at about 80% of the industry standard. That's sort of just the gauge that we try and set ourselves. You have to take a deep breath when you look at some of those prices, and we find sometimes we're on the ball for a lot of it and then we'll be way off kilter with something else.
So if you're listening in, the BB Vet is used a lot in Australia, and it's anonymous data sharing of what other practices are charging. You don't know who the practices are. It is broken down to subcategories of, demographics, etc. In the UK, this has started now. I believe there's actually a free. You can jump on board with BB Vet and actually get it for free. So they get numbers up, but they're getting the point where that will not long be free. New Zealand, definitely available, and US, it is starting to be available now.
Also, all BB Vet?
Yeah.
So in all the countries, same site?
Yeah, you just pick what country you're from. It's the most unbelievable tool because it takes the emotion out of charging. It's just like, well, this is where the industry's at. So it's just a really nice way to have a system. When it comes to price setting, you want to have a system that removes emotion because, let's face it, as vets, we ain't that wonderful about talking about money to our clients.
And can I clarify, if you say at 80%, is the results a bell curve of pricing for each individual item? And then you can go, I want to be median or I want to be top end or low end. And does it include stuff like, because there's obviously specialist pricing, or an emergency clinic is going to charge differently for consult to your...
Yeah, so it includes, so you can definitely do that. So you put it in and it'll say, okay, what's the price of a consultation, a primary consultation, which is mainly not your specialist, more your average GP. But you can look at small animal clinics, city clinics, mixed clinics, and you can then put in the side what you want your percentage to be, and it'll say your current figure is, 90. And then if you say, okay, I want to be 80% of all the results, it might tell you it should be 110, that sort of thing. So it's really interactive. I'm not sure, it is more on the broader veterinary community, so I'm not sure if it would be applicable to your specialists. I'd have to sort of look at that. But for us, yes, we're a mixed practice, but only about 10% of our work is mixed. So I tend to go more on the small animal.
Yeah.
And if you say 80%, do you mean you are at the top 80 percentile?
Yes.
I mean, so you're not where 80% of practices are charging. If we're looking at a bell curve, you're on towards the right. Yep.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
My business partner, Shane Barker, was working with a practice a few days ago, and he sat down and said, when have you last done your pricing reviews? And I haven't for a while. So we sat down there and plugged them into BB Vet, and they were sitting, I think for consults, sitting on the 44th percentile, which means that there's only 44% of practices in Australia that are charging less than them. So it's quite down low. It's a great practice. And so he said, right, pop them up to and I think he chose the 65th or the 70th percentile. Rang him up a week later. Have you done those price changes? No. So Shane logged in. He said, how do you do this at EasyVet? He went in, started bumping up all the prices that should have been. Here's the really thing. This is just a two-vet practice. Found in consults alone, $22,000 of additional profit per year just by someone having the comfort of going to a 65th percentile. So it just highlights that this is just one of the things you've got to keep on every year. Otherwise, it sneaks up on you and it's just sort of leaking away the profit. So, particularly with inflation's been growing so quick. If you haven't done that, you get on it.
Quick money psychology question. So again, if I was a practice owner again, I would lean towards saying, well, I want to be in the middle of the pack because otherwise I don't want to be seen as one of the really expensive practices because maybe I'm going to lose clients because they're going to price shop and they're going to go, well, that guy's like the 80% point. I want the 40%. Is that a thinking process that people struggle with? I certainly would.
From my point of view, why would you want to be 40%? We pride ourselves on offering the best care we can and being the best we can. So, I'd love to be 100%, but then I'm like, I'm just a little mixed practice in the country. But at least to be 80%, then you need to provide the service that justifies being there as well. You can't just jack your prices up and not do a good job. You'll only get people through the door once. So it's about having all the standards of care and everything else in place so that you can justify that 80%.
Sam?
I think the way I'll often put it to people when they're struggling with this, where should I sit? And particularly if you're at the 40th or 50th percentile, to jump yourself up to the 70th, 80th, it feels like such a big hike and you get fearful of price shock. And, as was just pointed out, if you don't have the service, you might get price shock. So you want to have a strategy behind how you do it. But I say this to people, if I lined you up with 10 vet practices, and 1 is they're the worst practice, 10 is they're the best vet practice, where would you choose to stand? What's your belief around the client experience, the clinical skills, those sort of things? Where would you put yourself? And that'll give you a little bit of an idea. And I hope people aren't saying, or I'd go and stand in the fourth position, because if they are, you might need to jump onto some of Hugh's clinical podcasts and upskill in your technical skills. But you'd want to hope that most people are saying, oh, geez, at least I'd put myself in the 70th percentile. Here's the takeaway. It doesn't matter what you charge, it's expensive. That's just the thing. It doesn't mean it's not value, but to an uneducated person who comes in and pays a bill, gee, that seems like a lot of money. We look at a target of 300 invoices per full vet equivalent per month. I'm looking at your data for January and February. On average, if we had 3 full-time vet equivalents, we should be doing, if we're charging along, and by the way, that target of 300 invoices per vet equivalent per month is based on a vet doing $850,000 to $900,000 revenue per full-time vet equivalent, which in a small animal practice is a reasonable target with well-leveraged vets. So when you start asking, hey, Sam, how have you come up with these figures? Are you just plucking them out of the air? No. We look at high-performing practices and break down the data and have a look and say, what are the commonalities between what are they doing? And this is where it comes out that, well, they tend to be doing this amount of consults per month. And when we look at it and going, yeah, but are they killing themselves? Are they doing 12-hour days? And so it has to be broken down to, no, it's what's fair and reasonable for a full-time equivalent vet, which is, ballpark 38 hours a week. So that target of 300 is the target to go for. When we look at that, if you've got 4 vets we've got here, I understand a few people doing a bit here and a bit there, but really 4 vets doing 3-time full-time vet equivalent, 787 invoices for 2 months. Now, if our target was 300, we should be doing 900 for the 3 of them. So we should be at 1,800 per month. So we go, why is our wages high? Yep. Now you kind of, your feeling was, ooh, it feels a bit quiet. And I'd look at that and say, yeah, we're well down on a run rate here. So that's the first area is there enough business coming through the door? Now, question to you, are your team saying, yeah, we're still pretty busy? Or are they going, I'm sitting around, nothing to do, I want things to crank up?
No, they're all pretty aware that we're not anywhere near as busy as we should be or want to be. Some days, there's a bit more happening. I would love to have vets who are capable of doing 300 invoices a month. I think where we struggle is sometimes when we are asking them to do more, I get people struggling with coping with that sort of level of work. But even if we doubled what we did, I'd be pretty happy.
We can talk about quiet, because quiet can be a cyclical thing. Quiet can be a client experience thing. Quiet can be a marketing. We just need to dial in marketing. So I want to talk about that bit in a minute. What I want to talk about at the moment is you've alluded to get to 300 per vet per month. You reckon your team would be redlining, they'd go, why?
Yeah, can I dig into those numbers to lead you into this, Sam? Because I'm in my head trying to do the math. So you said 300 invoices per full-time vet per month, which, if I say the average, it's a 4-day work week, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Full-time. Yeah. So it means 16 work days per month. So it means you're going to be doing 18.75 transactions per day. Am I getting my numbers right?
Yep.
And transactions, does that include everything from the recheck consult to the orthopedic surgery?
Correct.
So you billing 18 things a day.
Correct.
Which is, it's not impossible, but it's a lot. I will, as an employee vet, I'll go, that's not a small number of things if I want to maintain a good standard of work.
Yeah. If you're working under the old model where vet walks out, says, hello, client comes in, vet does their shake and dice, does everything, explains everything, checks everything, talks about the insurance, talks about the food, talks about the problem, then talks about what they're going to do, then talks about the money. Yep. To do that, you're unlikely to do that under the old vet model, which is why the old vet model is well and truly dead, or should be, because the vet is the most expensive part of your pipeline. You want to think about leveraging vets. So I'll give you an idea of what's possible. $1.5 million revenue per full-time vet equivalent doing a 38-hour week. Best on ground I've seen.
And what does that equate to in terms of transactions per day? Like, obviously a big component of that is pricing.
They were sitting at around about 300 to 350 on average invoices per vet per month.
Okay.
It's a system thing because that's not one vet. That's averaged across, they've got 3 vets. Now, they've sort of settled things down, but I know on average they're doing $1 million and better per full-time vet equivalent per month.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And one more question. Sorry, Sam. Are these numbers applicable? Is it Australia only, or can you extrapolate to the US, to anybody else listening?
It's the same. It's more, rather than being caught on the specific numbers, because, in terms of the invoices generated per vet, the US have been doing this for quite a long time. They're a little bit more advanced in it, is having, their vet techs in there and leveraging the vet, which just means that the vet will come in and become more a director of a director as opposed to, the whole show. So they're not the entertainment, they're really directing the entertainment. And what we can see is that on average, a vet's time well leveraged, 7 to 8 minutes, you can do a pretty solid consult of actual vet time. You think about everything else, most people are running 30-minute consults. What's a vet doing for the other, let's even call it 20 minutes if we're being generous? Well, they're writing their notes, they're building some rapport, they're talking about things that the animal we need to talk about, but that's not a vet skill that the vet has to do that. So the psychology here is thinking about time in motion. What is everything? If you want to do this, follow your vets around for a day and write down everything they're doing and how long they spend doing it, and then you can start crapping yourself. Because what you're going to realise is that one of the reasons vets get burnt out is they spend a lot of the time doing stuff that they don't like doing, but they see it as part of their job. So a more leveraged model is, let's just have vets diagnose, prescribe, cut, and take everything off, including, follow-up phone calls. Vets don't have to do that, but clients need to have it. But you have someone who's really good at communicating, do it. Hey, I've just spoken to Dr. Hugh, and here's the feedback. Everything went really well, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a few cases where Dr. Hugh, where things have gone a bit pear-shaped, might want to take that call, but largely you don't. And it's thinking about everything that you can leverage vets, writing vets notes. If you're not using AI now, you're really being left behind. AI is just getting better and better and better, and the quality of the notes and how it summarises and just pulls it in what you need is brilliant. You need to start thinking about this, preserve your sanity as a vet, but also for your team, is get them to doing things they like doing, because they have fun when they're actually doing stuff or doing some medical workups. A lot of the client work is for vets, it'll chew them up, it'll burn them out.
On that, we do utilise nurses in our consult room, but we can definitely leverage them way more. Yeah.
How long do you allocate for a consult?
20 minutes.
20 minutes? Walk me through what's happening in your consult process using vet nurses.
So in that 20 minutes, the nurses will greet the client, take them into the room. They'll discuss any preventative health concerns and make sure we're not missing anything in that regard, because it's a lot more convenient for the client if we can do that while they're in than having them back again. So they will talk about preventative health. They'll have a look in the mouth and grade the teeth as well. And then the vet will come in. The nurse will pass over any of the history that's relevant. Like if it's not in for vaccination, if it's in for something else, they'll discuss what they've already discussed with the client, ask the client if they've missed anything. Then the vet will do a physical exam while the nurse types up all the notes and helps hold the animal as well. And then at the end of the consult, I'm constantly encouraging the vets to leave the room at that point and hand over any discussions around medication, ongoing treatment or bookings to the nurse.
Yeah.
Where I'm finding is currently happening, Sam, is the vets aren't leaving the room. So they're staying in there and they're doing the estimates, they're doing the discussion with the client. So it's just, they've got to let that go.
Why are they doing that, do you think?
I think it's just habit, and it's they feel they should be doing it because they've been doing it for a while. And we were pretty light on nurses there for a few months. We had pretty junior staff, and so the vets were doing more of that side of thing. We're currently having some renovations. We'll have an extra consult room in the next couple of months, and that will make us a lot more efficient. At the moment, we've only got 2 rooms. So with the vet leaving that room early, there's not another room they can go into if we had the work. So, but yeah, I mean, these are all just excuses. We need to be doing it better.
So let me ask you the question. Are you working, you've got 2 consult rooms. Have you got 2 vets consulting at a time?
Yes, usually. And when we have the numbers coming in, we have 2 vets consulting every day and another one in the treatment area doing surgery.
So what is the vet doing? So let's say we're allocating 20 minutes for the vet's really just working that room, and we've got our vet liaison or our vet nurse in with the vet the whole 20 minutes, yep?
Yep.
Okay. So if you really, and I'm not saying you should do this, by the way, I understand you've got a team and, you had 2 practices, you've condensed them down to 1 practice and had quite a lot of team. Have you still got in your mind, is there team, are you still trying to build the business to support the team? Because I know that was initially the strategy, build the business to support the team, or do you feel that's kind of at a par of where it needs to be now?
I think our team is really solid. We've got a good team, but we do need to build the business. Like, I feel we've been short on nurses, as I mentioned. We've just had somebody join us this week because she's a vet tech doing a Cert 4 nursing role. We're going to be lighter on vets in the coming months with people going on leave. And what I'd love is for the clinic to continue to increase generation with less vets, more nurses. So that's sort of where we're at.
Yeah. There's a really important point I want to land here. When you're not that busy and you're trying to build in leverage, it's really hard to do because the vets are thinking, well, I don't have people queued up to see me, so I might as well stay here and feel like I'm useful. And it's just a part of human nature that it's really hard. It's like, okay, we're really quiet, let's do all the cleaning and do all the bits. It's just not how the brain works. You tend to just slow everything down and take longer. Parkinson's law says, how long do you allocate to a project? Well, it's basically, it'll take as long as you allocate to a project. So a consult is no different. In a utopian style, having one vet with a vet tech or a vet nurse or vet liaison, whatever you want to call them, working one room and prepping and getting the client ready. So basically one vet's working 2 rooms, because otherwise we can tend to lose the value of having the nurses support them. We've just got more headcount to do the same job. So if you're going to go through this stage of bringing in this support, which I suggest you do, like a vet tech or a vet liaison or nurse, you want to think about, my vet's performance has to increase significantly. So this is where I'd look at it and go, we've sort of built for performance, but we're not in the environment to allow that performance to happen. The best thing that can happen here is that you are relied on vets, because what will happen, they will develop the operating cadence of, okay, now we've only got 1 vet, we're working 2 rooms. That's the only time you're going to learn to work 2 rooms, is when you have to.
Yeah, I'm quite excited about it. I've got girls going on maternity leave, vets on leave, and I really think we can use this as a way of pushing this model moving forward, and just using our vet techs, our Cert 4 nurses, and having 3 consulting rooms between 2 vets will work. It'll be a lot more effective than what we've currently got.
And here's the way to frame it up. I want you to reframe this with your team. Let's grow by 30% and feel like you're doing less.
Yeah, that's it. Yes. And that is something I think I did mention before is, how do you not scare the vets off, so to speak, by saying, look, we can do more. I like the idea about reframing it. And we do have discussions around trying to leverage them and make sure they're utilising the nurses, and that the nurses are utilising the animal care girls, so that everybody can perform to the best ability.
It's like, how do you ride a bike? You can get all the theory, you can understand it, but it's not until someone pushes you and you've got to figure out how to balance on the thing, you actually learn how to do it. And what I've observed is when people are trying to build a more leveraged model, they're trying to do it incrementally. Sometimes the best thing to do is go, okay, great, I'm going to, we're not going to put another vet on or bring in a locum. We're going to figure out how to do it. I can remember a time when I had a vet practice on the Gold Coast, and I went through about a year where I couldn't employ a vet. And I went, well, okay, I'm not prepared to slow down what we're doing. And so I said, how do we grow by 30 or 40% without a vet and without decreasing the client experience and not missing stuff? And what happens is when you present a different game or a different frame, the brain will start figuring out, okay, we need to adapt and evolve. How are we going to do this? So what I would present to your team is, how exciting. I want you working less. Feel like you're working less, because a well-leveraged vet will feel like they're working less. And I can tell you, if they walk in and they're there for about 6 or 7 minutes and then walk out to the next one and they haven't written up their notes, everything's happening, but they're just doing less. The standard comment I hear is vets will say, I feel guilty. I feel like I'm not working so hard. And yet this is the solution to the burnout scenario that's going on. What you need to overcome is the fear in a vet space of stress, which is I'm going to be overwhelmed because of more work. And this is where we start introducing ideas of what can we chip away. And I would literally put to them, how could you be twice as effective in half the time? When you take figures that where they're so far out, you've got to break the mold. They call it 10x thinking. If you said, how can you see 10 times the amount of clients in the same amount of time? They can't start thinking incrementally like little 10% shifts. They have to break the model and start again. And this is how it allows you to think really differently, and less is more. And it'll mean the vet getting really good on what they're good at, and your support team becoming very good at the rapport building, the going through the pricing and booking stuff in.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting, Sam. The other thing we've been doing as a practice is looking at our marketing and our client experience as well and getting everybody's buy-in. So that pressure's off the vet. It is on the nurses, it's on reception staff, it's everybody else.
Yeah. How have you framed that up to your team to build this client experience? Do you walk in and you go, right, I'm on the client experience bandwagon today and you will all provide amazing experience?
Pretty much. No. No, well, the way I framed it to them, we had a whole staff meeting last week, is that I genuinely feel we do an excellent job around our patient care. Everybody puts the patient first. So how do we ensure clients see us putting the patient first? Because if we can get that client experience 10 out of 10, then they're going to want to come back to us, they're going to trust us, we're going to get repeat visits, and they're going to tell their friends. So I framed it as we are actually doing a really good job, but are people aware of how good a job we're doing? How do we educate to value? How do we ensure that they get as good an experience, if not better, than their pets? And my receptionist came up with a line the other day. She said, it's the clients that drive the pets to the vets, not the pets. You've got to get that client experience. And I was like, that's pretty cool.
That's great.
So we had a really good meeting with lots of input and lots of ideas about what we're already doing well and how to share and what we could be doing better.
The next thing we want to take a look at is standards of care. And standards of care essentially means if a client walks in, let's say the dog's been vomiting, do we say, okay, give it chicken and rice for 24 hours, or let's put it on a drip, take a blood test? That's our minimum standard of care. And to give a little frame up around this is where the profitability in vet practices really sits in offering that higher standards of care, which basically just means offering more thorough medicine. In the medical space, in the human medical space, I understand that, and I'm talking about radiology, around about 80% of diagnostic imaging is done to rule out, not to rule in. Let's say a dog comes in with a lame leg. We're taking an x-ray to make sure it doesn't have an early tumour that we're not going to pick up. So the best case scenario is you pick nothing up. And I think that's one of the challenges around standards of care, because we're trying to do this as cheaply as possible for clients and save their hard-earned money. We're thinking about, I need to pick the one thing that's going to rule in. So this is why standards of care becomes so important. It's the step-by-step process that if an animal comes in with, gunk in the ear, we've got some discharge in the ear or some black stuff in the ear, what's our approach? If it's a vomiting in an unwell animal, developing those basic standards of care, which, Hugh, that's your jam, is developing those skill sets. What we then like to do is measure it. There's a few key ones we like to look at when we're assessing how's the standards of care. The first one we look at, one of them is % revisit rate. And a revisit rate, the standard of care, if it's too high, like if we're at 50%, we start thinking that that's someone who doesn't really know what they're doing. We'll typically see this in a new grad because they're like, crap, round one, let's get it back and see if it's better or not. What's our target? It's around about a 25, 30-ish percentage rate. So when I'm taking a look at this, I'm seeing yours sitting at 7.5%, 20%, 14%, 8%, 11%. Insights to that?
Yeah, so I deep dived into this the other day because that figure had come to my attention, and we're very good at rebooking, as in getting clients back in, whether it's for a revisit or for next year. But I was quite surprised by that number. I would have assumed our revisit rate was at least 30%. And I think what's happening is our rebooking for phone calls, not actual in-clinic visits. So I brought that to the team's attention last week and went, we can't be relying on an owner to tell us if the pet's better. We need them in the clinic. So that's actually a focus for us at the moment is, why are we wanting to see these animals again? And it's to ensure that the condition has improved, that they are better. Does it need more treatment? We can't be doing that with a phone call. So that's something that's just sort of slipped in over the last few months, is phone calls instead of actual in-clinic visits.
And I think it's such a great point to highlight. This is why looking at your data on a monthly basis and having what we call data-made decisions. The data just tells us what's going on. Then you can. It's just the data's the data. That's how many revisits are there. If you're not sure about the data, you can go back and check if I got things categorized correctly. But if the data's right, then it allows you to dig deeper and you've identified, we're booking phone calls. That's not a rebook. This comes back to standards of care too. So for example, your standards of care might be an ear case that's seen. All ear case as a minimum standard of care are re-seen 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, whatever you as a practice decide. And you build those revisits in. And this is where you might want to go and have a look at the standards of care and dig in and say, do we have revisits in there as a standard of care? And when you ask, you might be listening going, why am I picking these specific things to look at? Well, if you start trying to look at all the data, good luck, you're going to go crazy. You won't. It'll be very hard to make decisions around who needs help or where there's a fundamental problem if there's too much data. So they call them key point indicators or KPIs, or you can call them performance metrics, or you can call them, standards of care metrics, whatever you'd like. What we're looking at, it's a reflection of the psychology of the business. That's what's really going on. So when we see, okay, we've got revisits low, I can tell you there's a certain resistance to booking someone in to come back and a recheck because the team's thinking, I'm not really sure if it's 100% necessary to spend the client's money there. Is that possibly the case, do you think?
Yeah, I think it is, Sam. And I also, we have clients we cover a massive area, it's sort of like a 100k radius. So there's a bit of a perception, which I found out the other day from our receptionist, feels bad about getting people to drive all the way back. Yeah, and then she said, what happens sometimes, they're in a post-op check, they're in there for 2 minutes. And I'm like, right, well, that's the issue. That post-op check should not be 2 minutes. It should be a thorough exam, taking the time so the clients see the value. So it's interesting when you look at those figures, you pull out all these other things and you end up finding that we're not doing a good enough job at these revisits to show the value.
Can I ask a question? Could it be a telehealth paid visit? Because yes, I know you live 50 k's away. I don't need hands on the dog, but I need to see the wound. I need to chat to you, and we make great. Is it viable to say, well, yeah, we're gonna have a telehealth visit if you want to, but we're still gonna pay you because it's still my staff time?
No, I think that's a really good option. We do the occasional telehealth consult, but we don't utilise them enough in that regard. But to be honest, I don't think that many people live that far away. I think it's a perceived issue rather than being an actual issue. I pulled up the revisit thing in our last staff meeting, and by doing that, I was able to get people's ideas around it and where their thoughts were coming from, which then allows us to put some things in place to sort of improve that side of things.
I get it as a client. I would be annoyed if I had to. I am annoyed when my doctor makes me go back to get my blood results and I'm in there for a minute. I'm like, I've just wasted an hour and a half of my day to find parking, drive here and stuff. Fuck. Excuse me, but that's how I feel.
You want to feel the benefit of it. Why have I come all the way back? Oh, they've just looked at the window and kicked me out the door. That's not what we want. So.
But if we put ourselves in the client's shoes, if the client's not seeing the value in it, why should I come back? And if they do, they might go, I had to come all that way, waste of time. So therefore, I'm now giving you a 6 out of 10 for my client experience. So this is where thinking about your system, and you might, if you think they're stock standard cases, you could build in and say, for this particular case, we'd be okay doing this as telehealth. It'll be done X, but it's going to save you an hour and a half coming in. Would you like to do that? Now, what have you done? 1, you've turned a phone call into an appointment. That could be done where the vet's seeing it, viewing. 2, you've legally covered your butt because it hasn't been, I think it's okay. And number three, you've actually thought about this from a client's perspective, and this is going to overcome the team's resistance to, it's a 2-second check, I don't know if it's worth it. What I would like doing is bundling, where this can be the revisit is prepaid, because then we've overcome the whole lot at once. And you just frame it up. We understand it's a bit of a drive. It's probably a pain in the butt for you to come in. Yeah. And they're like, yeah. I say, awesome. So here's what we do. We've just invoiced you a fee. It's for a revisit fee. We only do it in certain cases, but we feel this is fine. So what we're going to do is we'll be set up. We'll need you to just do, and I don't know what you do, FaceTime or how you want to do it, Zoom, however you want to do it. Think about somewhere safe. But you don't get them to pay for it then, because they're out of the business. It's hard to do. It's a bit messy. Just pre-bundled. And that way you're approaching the staff's challenge, the team's challenge, you're addressing that. So they're probably going to come on board easy for that, because what's the benefit to them? They don't have to deal with that. They're just wasting their time. Number two, you're looking at it from the client's point of view. And number three, we're looking at this from a business point of view. And number four, we're looking at it from a pet point of view. So there's a little thing we can do just around your revisits. Let's move on to my next one we take a look at, which is dentistry. Why do we look at dentistry? There's a friend of mine who ran 12 practices, probably the best performing group of practices I've ever seen. He was working a couple of days a week. He was mostly looking after culture. People love staying there, et cetera, et cetera. And what he'd found from observing figures over a lot of times is if the dental numbers were right, if they were within the right sort of range that you're after, typically the amount of x-rays being taken, blood tests being done, etc., were actually okay. He found it was what's called a lead indicator of the approach to, the treatment of animals. Now, I know there's some people that love dentistry and there's some that passionately dislike. You're smiling. Are you a dislike dental man, are you?
I've just been in emergency for 15 years, so yeah. I am back in GP now and I have to relearn it. So I can't tell you if I used to hate it, but I might feel differently now.
Your targets you're aiming for in an average practice should be, a starting place is 10 per vet per month, full-time equivalent. So when I take a look at these, there seems to be a bit of room there, 2.5 per month. Now, I understand what's probably happening is the one who's sitting on 7, they like doing dentistry, so other people book it and then give it to that person to do it. So that's what's happening?
Yeah, I think that does happen. So it doesn't reflect the person booking them. But I looked at our dentals for failure, for example, we did 16. So we're only halfway there. If we've got 3 full-time vets, we should be doing 30. We are staging them, which is helping a lot. And if we stage our dentals, it helps with booking, because you're only doing a stage 1 this day. And then when they're coming back for extractions, that's helping. And it's also, we are making some movement in our dentistry. As much as those figures aren't great, they're double what they were this time last year.
Bingo. Really big point there, everyone. We're not looking at the game is always played against yourself. As we say, you swim in your own lane. So what we're after is that progression, not perfection, that there's obviously opportunities there the team's getting better at. What have you done to double that amount of dentistry to?
Well, I think a lot of it has just come down to the fact, so we do training around it. We've done dental training days and the need for dentals and why we should be doing it. So everybody's on board and feeling the same. But to be honest, it's the staging. Like everybody's happier. We don't have new grad vets or younger vets going in going, oh my God, what am I going to find with this mouth today? They know even if they do this first stage and it's pretty bad, they're not going to have to tackle it today. It'll come back and be tackled when they're in the right mindset, they've got the time available and they're ready to roll. So I honestly feel the staging has been the biggest turnaround on getting people on board. And because we're doing more, everybody's more confident. They're better at the x-rays, they're better at the extractions, and they're enjoying it. So I don't really have anybody that now goes, oh, I don't want to do this dental. They're all actually finding it a challenge, which is good.
Obviously, most of the opportunity we see as dentistry is your sort of grade 2s and your grade 1 dentistry. Did you find resistance that, once again, it's like, oh, it's not really too bad, we won't book that in yet? Or they felt challenges even from the client pushing back, going, doesn't look that bad, why should I book it in?
Yeah, we definitely had some resistance across the team with that. But again, as we've been doing more, you think there's not much there, but now that we've had dental x-rays for a couple of years now, and a lot of these ones that you do think are just going to be a quick scale and polish, you're finding more disease. So the more we're finding, the more on board everybody is. But you've got to get them on board to sort of get the numbers in to start finding it. So it's quite a tricky thing. Another thing we do is we actually do invoice checking. So we look at every invoice produced and the history involved with that. And we've got a real focus on ensuring that every animal's mouth gets graded and discussed. They're not allowed to just put grade 1 or grade 3. They've got to say, okay, I found this today and this is what I've recommended. And everybody's on board that. So that's good.
That's great. Tell me the approach with the invoice checking. What happens when you have someone who's not doing it? How's that being approached to that team member? Is it seen as naughty person, or they don't have a belief in it? How do you handle it?
Well, we talk about candid conversations and being courageous and being able to bring things up to each other. So generally I find with the invoice checking, the majority of the team are doing a really good job, but we'll find if someone's dropping off on the histories, we just pull them aside and go, hey, look, what happened? You missed 8 histories last week. Why was that? Did you not have a nurse? And just sort of dive into that. But yes, with the dental side of things, I think that is one we would find that people were not grading the mouth.
Yep.
And the reason they weren't was because then they were challenged because, oh my God, if I grade it, I've then got to discuss it with client, which means a whole conversation around money and need and all that. So there's a lot of training goes behind the consult, as you know.
Yeah. Shameless plug. We looked at this as a problem, and so we created a program called W Dentistry that people could do in their own practice and buy it and do it. And I was talking to a practice the other day that did it, and I said, how'd it go for you? Did you get a good return on investment? I said, yeah, not too bad. We did 6 times the amount of dentistry we were doing before we started it. And I said, why? What was the big difference? And the big difference, they said, look, the technical training and stuff was great, but we're already pretty good at that. What it was our belief in dentistry, that it's actually the right thing to book it in. And that was the big change. And I think that you said once you get them on board, that's the hard thing. I think that's always the starting place. If you're looking at your data at the moment and you're thinking, I want to get my wages down, a great way to do it is by doing more dentistry, because of course a lot of that can be done, depending on where you live in the world, by a well-trained team member. Scale and polishes can be done by that. Doesn't have to be a vet doing it. So it's actually it's one of the most lucrative or profitable parts of a vet practice there is. It's starting with belief and having a champion. Have you got a dental champion? There's someone that just lives and breathes it, it's their jam?
We do have a couple of girls that are pretty fired up about it, but I'm glad you mentioned the program because we have done that a couple of times over the years with the girls, and we need to do it again. We've got a whole lot of new staff on board, and every time we do spend the time on that, we get increased uptake.
Yeah. The saying is people need to be reminded more often that they're taught. But also, to your point, you think, I've done that training, and then you've got a new team coming on board. And I always use the analogy of a footy team. They don't need to learn how to pass a ball, but they practice at every match. They practice it at every training, just to keep that cadence of keeping it front of mind.
The dentistry conversation, because I get what you're saying, Louise. It's not even the money conversation or anything. But if you are busy, and it comes back to your liaison model, Sam, if I'm under the pump and I'm seeing sick animals and I'm out of time and I have people waiting, then I don't want to start the dentistry conversation. I'm thinking back to my GP days because I'm like, fuck, that's another 15 minutes that I don't want to open that can of worms. So then I'll brush over it. Versus if I have the opportunity to say, ooh, you dug this to the dental, I'm going to go to my next consult. Nurse Sam's going to come in a second and she's going to run you through the whole dental plan thing. Okay, bye, I'm out.
Yeah.
Does that solve that problem for you?
When someone says I'm too busy, if we look at dentistries, and often I hear, we don't have the room, we haven't got the time, we haven't got the staff, and they don't like it. But it's a kind of wake up. Say, you're too busy to be a good vet. And of course, it's a little bit appeals to the core of why we wanted to be a vet. But it is true because dentistry has always been treated as the poor cousin of medicine and surgery. When that shifts, and that's the real process in that W Dentistry program, when they shift and see that as important as a medical case, then what happens, you start valuing it, so you put the time towards it, but secondly, you actually charge the similar kind of what you need to make it on par. And that's the big thing we've seen is when we look at how people price dentistry, a lot of the time it's like, it's just dentistry. And it's like literally at 50% of everything else that they would normally charge in their vet time. So of course you don't value. If you don't value it, you're not going to spend the time. So I always say, what a wonderful problem to have. You're not doing much dentistry, because it just tells you there's a whole pile of opportunity there that can be taught really quickly, and the skills can be learnt, virtually. You don't now need to do live workshops.
And I think it's really important you're all singing the same tune, as you said. So they're hearing it at reception, they're hearing it with the nurses, because a lot of the time with the dental disease, the client hasn't come in for that, unless it's really bad. So you have to be able to sell the value and have the client appreciate why we're doing it. And if you can do that for dentistry, then you can do it for anything else. Because most of the time, the other, your conversions and your consult, they're coming because the client has found a primary problem. So if your animal's vomiting, diarrhea, it's quite easy in a way to say, okay, we need to do bloods, we need to do x-rays. If they're coming in for a vaccination or something quite routine, and then you're going down the dental path, you really need to be good at your job to convert them to having a procedure done.
I'm a big fan of hacks in the sort of sales process, or I don't like the word sales, but in the making ethical recommendation. And the best one I heard from a dental specialist. When a client just sees a bit of tartar on there, because it's not presenting any problem, it's pretty hard to say, oh, that's serious, we got to sort it out. And so he said, if there's any gingivitis there at all, he said, imagine I took that out. So I took that thing out, that tooth out, and then I went and jammed it in your bone, in your femur of your leg. You reckon your leg would get infected and that would cause inflammation and not go so well? And the client's like, oh, that's terrible. Yeah. Said, well, that's what's going. That thing's jammed up into bone. We need to sort that out. And that little hack, it actually, for me, even as a vet, it allowed me to just go, this is a grade 1. Damn, don't let that thing get to a grade 2, because that's going to get bad. This is what it's like. And it was such a hack that obviously resonates with the clients, that then they could understand the value, because of you're not talking in technical terms. If you want to get reference range, up to 30 per vet per month, that's someone who just loves it day in, day out. There's only 2 others I really look at we're going to talk about today. One is number of blood tests done. And the target, of course, there is 27 per FTE full-time equivalent per month. And when we look at this, you guys do a lot of blood tests. So you have a high belief around the value of blood tests and feel comfortable saying the client's the right thing to do. Is that true?
Yes, we do. And like I would assume most practices have these days, we have in-house blood machines. We've put a bit of a different strategy in place. What we found, we have a lot of part-time vets, and one of the issues we had around efficiency is, say I see an animal one day and do a blood test, but I'm not there the next day to report on it if it's gone out of the clinic. Then another vet then has to read the history and get themselves familiar, and it just became really inefficient. So we now have whoever takes the blood sample reports on it, unless it's an urgent matter. Yep. So that has helped. But we do a lot in-house, and we also send some out to the lab.
That point there, you should allocate the income, or the if you're counting blood tests, whoever did it, to the person that made the recommendation, because anyone can fill the order. The value in a practice is when a client says yes to something that you recommend the pet ethically needs. Everything else in your business is filling that one moment in time. What we're interested in when we're looking at a team is who's really good at those recommendations and who's not, because if they're not, then we need to go and give them some more support. So it can't be necessarily the person that does the procedure, it's the person that makes the recommendation. That's the data we want to capture.
How do you do that practically? Because again, the person that's going to take the bloods and run it's going to be the one that bills it.
It should be billed under like who made the recommendation. It's system to system, so we don't get too excited about telling you how do you do it. But what's important is a process to identify who made the recommendation, because everything else is just filling the order. To that end, the last one we'd like to look at is imaging. And imaging, our target's 18. We've got someone sitting at 28 and someone sitting at 4, an 18 and a 4. So is the one who's sitting at 4 recommending and sending them all to the person sitting at 28, or is the person at 4 just not doing x-rays?
And that's where we have to look. I have a couple of pregnant people in the building, which is ongoing. And I do find that quite hard. Going back to your previous point, Sam, like in a consulting room, it's very easy to track what a vet has recommended and what they've charged. But then when it's someone else doing that surgery or doing the recommendation, that is a bit of a tricky one. And I haven't really figured out a way to track that, So I might have some of my girls that perform really well in the consulting room, but they're only doing surgery and dentistry once a week. So they might only have a couple dentals to the name, even though they've recommended 6. I'd love to know a easy way to do that, because I feel you also have to value the person doing the surgery and not just give all the credit to the person booking it in.
Yeah, to present that comes up a lot. Oh, the person doing it feels like they're not getting a score against their name. But you think about a rugby team, it's the fancy pants wingers who score most of the tries, and the old prop, he doesn't get too much, but there's no way a winger's scoring a try without a prop. So it's very much sitting down with a team and explaining, guys, this is why we're doing it. Understand that there's three parts to a business. Number one is attract. So we want to attract clients to us, and that can be through our marketing, that can be through referrals and word of mouth, etc. Number two is what we call convert. So convert is they're in the consult room, and I could give it, sick dog, okay, let's give it rice and water for 24 hours and see how it goes. Or I could do an IV fluids, a blood test, palpate, there's a bit tender in the abdomen, let's just take an x-ray to rule out. That's where the real profitability in a practice is made. And this is where we want our champions. This is where, when we're working with businesses, what we want to do is have as much going on, so then we've got more to deliver, which means our team out the back is doing the delivery. So quite frankly, the person who's filling the order, I'm not that concerned. They're going to have a different metric. Their metric's going to be, how quickly did you get through the surgery? How clean was the surgery? Lack of post-op complications. They're the metrics I want to understand there. But understand that they are as important as the person that's made the recommendation. And no one has a job if the other one's not doing their job. So I think it's a team-based approach that they need to understand why first before then you break it down. And quite frankly, I would actually not figure it out. I'd ask the team, I'd say, guys, how do you think is a really good way we could do this? And I'd hand the challenge back to them, and you'll be surprised at how quickly they'll come up with a solution. But I wouldn't try to be doing it without getting the team on board first, because there'll be resistance around it.
It's a common problem, Sam. I hear it from employees often. I've been in that boat. I'm not an orthopedic surgeon. I've worked in a practice that measures average transactions fees, and then I'd get my reviews, and mine would be much less than the guy doing the TPLOs. But I was very good at the mild lameness gets a workup and ends up on the surgery table. Yeah. But I'm not getting any credit for that. So when I'm asking for a raise, the boss goes, "No, your numbers are shit." How do you practically get around that?
Well, I would say that your boss probably need a bit more education, to be honest, because they're not understanding their data.
I get that, but how do you measure that? How do you get better at that as a boss, at interpreting what's really going on?
I think, one, you've got to have a system. That's why I like using a dashboard. Most people are guessing. I like a dashboard, and in the dashboard, I like to have someone's name and who got the sale. If you look at any other organisation, they're interested in goes, who gets the sale? And then, of course, you've got a packing room up the back where someone's just packing orders and putting away. They have different metrics. But to me, who's the person that I would find it easier to find a really good technical vet than I would find a gun in the consult room. And I'm after the gun in the consult room every time. Here's what you find: a gun in the consult room, they're often really happy consulting. It's a game. They love it. They're just burning through it. And they're the ones who'll go, hey, give me 3 rooms to work at once. And it doesn't burn them out. They get juiced on it. So I really used to break our business into consulting vets and surgical and delivery vets. And we're only a small team, but I was a consult vet. I lied. Give me that stuff. And because I could find someone so much faster, so much better at surgery. I'd often get people to say in the consult room, are you doing the surgery? I go, hell no. You don't want me doing this surgery. I'm going to put the gun on it. And so, there was no ego there. What I was interested in, the best outcome, I was way better at consulting and they were way better at surgery. Let's work in our zone of genius. All right. So we've really spent quite a lot of time on standards of care because we often think this is where the challenge comes. The last piece is more cadence, so more clients walking through the door. We've identified a couple of things there with, revisits. You're booking in, so you use the book it in now process, do you? Where you book in the next, be it a vaccination in a year's time, that's booked in, as opposed to we've sent a reminder to ask you to book in?
Yes, we do, which is fantastic. We're a lot less reliant on our reminder system. We do. Everybody gets rebooked, whether it's for a revisit in a couple of weeks or a vaccination in a year or a blood test in 6 months. We find that works really well.
So what I would like to understand now, it comes down to, we're seeing less clients than last year, or less people walking through the door. And the question is why? Do you know the answer to that at this moment in time?
I don't. I mean, I can blame the fact we've been in drought here for the whole summer. I can blame the fact on people being worried about money, but I actually do not know why we have less coming in the door.
Right. Do you have a feedback system for identifying why that could be? Because I'd be wanting to talk to your clients now. The next step I want to know is this a delivery issue? Is it a client experience issue? Is it a pricing issue? Or is it literally, I just don't have the money and so therefore I'm trying not to spend money? And the only way you're going to find that is by actually interviewing and talking to people. And how I would do that, I would go through, and you've got your lapsed clients. So on this dashboard, you can go through and see a lapsed client. A lapsed client we call someone who we haven't seen between 12 and 15 months. If they haven't been, what I would be doing is I would be jumping on the call. And if I was the business owner, I would actually do this myself. I would jump on there, call the people, and say, hey, we haven't seen you for a year. What's going on? Everything okay? You do 20 or 30 of those calls, you're going to start getting a theme. Now, you might need to ask some pointed questions and you may not like the answer. I like 1 to 10 questions. 1 to 10, what value for money would you give? 1 to 10, what client experience level would you give? And you're trying to understand, is it something we're doing? Or is this strictly because there's a drought on? And I know when there's a drought on, I've had a couple of mixed animal practices. When there's a drought on, they zip those wallets up pretty quick and they just do nothing. And then it rains and out comes the new headers, the new cars, the new this, the new that. But you'd be wanting to understand that. And I would be going across a demographic of not 1 or 2 clients. I'd be wanting to go and ask 20, 30 clients. And, you'd have such great rapport with your clients. You could say, hey, listen, can I have a really honest conversation? The other way you can do this is you can do it as a focus group, like get 20 or 30 of them. Say, hey guys, we're going to have an evening. We have a pizza night. You're part of our advisory and we'd just love to get some feedback from you. And that way you can really dig in and start building some trust and asking some really pointed questions. I remember doing this once. I heard about it. I thought, that's a good idea. And I got some of my clients. I got good clients, average clients and bad clients, as in clients who didn't come in much. I didn't have any robbers or murderers there, I don't think. And I remember one of the greatest insights that came out of that afternoon or that evening is I said, let me ask you this. When it comes to value, like what you pay at a vet, irrespective of the practice you go to, do you feel that a vet charges you a lot because they understand your emotional bond with that animal and they just feel they can get away with it? And to a T, I think there was 9 out of 10 said yes. And it was such a great insight for me to understand that they just see a high fee and they think vet's taking advantage of my emotional bond. And then when I explained to them percentages and stuff, they're like, oh my gosh, you guys actually aren't, from a business model, a lot of you aren't doing very well. But they just have no idea of the cost of the overhead. So for me, it was such a great insight to go, okay, set your prices at a place that's, as you've done, fair, reasonable. Where would you put yourself at a lineup of vets? And then you've got to park that, then focus on everything else that's associated with the delivery, which is what I'd be wanting to know is, we think we do well with client experience. Do we really? And the only way you're going to do that is by asking them 1 to 10, what score did you give and why? Here's one other for listeners. If you want to understand this is, am I less busy because my client experience is not great? Here's a question you can ask. If you're at a barbecue, how would you describe your last visit to our vet practice to a friend? And that way you're getting the juice, not necessarily a score, because people get weird around a score. They all go 7, which means nothing. Whereas if you're getting to understand, give me the dialogue behind it, that's where the real juice is. And that particular line we've found works unbelievably well. You'll often be surprised at what they actually say. I think that's it. I think you're actually all over your numbers. Congratulations for being all over your numbers. You don't know how rare that is. Fantastic.
Yeah, and I think, on that, we have been working together for a while now, Sam, and I would say to any business owners that are struggling out there, get some help, get support, sit with like-minded people, and it's amazing where you can end up.
Yeah.
Sam, we need to give homework.
The homework's very simple, but not easy. It's to set up some way of measuring how you're, like getting your basic data. People who are talking about Yeah, I get my figures from my accountant once a year. You can't run a business that way. That's like the pilot looking at the black box after the plane's crashed. What we want to do is have a look at the data, and you don't want to overdo it, but monthly from a management level, you need to understand how the business is going at a high level. And the big ones are turnover, average transaction value, wages, and COGS, costs of goods sold. They're the four really big ones you want to understand. So just start with your basic understanding of your financials, and then just measure your basics of how many consults your vets are doing per month, how many dentals they're doing per month, and you could just do how much imaging they're doing per month. And if you just started with those, it'll give you enough data to tell you where the challenges are. There's your homework.
So just getting back to your wage percentage. So percentage of total revenue, like that's all the money through the tills, right? And you said in some states there's extra taxes and stuff. So if I say wage percentage, that's wage percentage plus super. Is it any other wage expense? So if my staff have fuel allowances, or for example, I paid payroll tax when I was in WA, a 10% payroll tax.
Payroll tax goes in it. That's where I said you've got some other taxes. So Victoria, and I didn't realise Western Australia, but they have payroll tax. New Zealand have payroll tax, yeah.
And you shook your head when I said fuel allowances and stuff like that. Is it any...
That goes under an expense line. What you're talking is the straight cost of me actually paying, how much I pay you that's due. So, and that would include, holiday pay and all those sorts of things. But if you're paying, if they're away on conference, you pay for their conference, that doesn't go into that fee.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, cool. COGS. So is that all cost of running a business? So does that include rent and, electricity and everything? Or is it just your drug purchases? How do we determine COGS?
So it's drug purchases, it's your consumables as well, so stuff used in the clinic, and it's your cremation fees. So it's everything you need to sort of generate money on a day-to-day basis, but it's all medical supplies.
Including lab fees? Does that go in there?
Pathology definitely goes in, yeah.
It does, yeah.
If you think about it, it's any cost that is directly associated with particular items. So if I sell a box of flea treatment, I have to buy that box in order to sell it.
Okay, gotcha.
I've got to have my staff there. I've already got to pay my rent. I've got to have the lights on. I've got to have insurance. So they all sit under your expenses. It's the things that are directly influenced by the cost.
So if I'm doing a TPLO surgery, the implant cost for that surgery, that's all sort of stuff.
It's all that sort of stuff, and it's the consumables associated with the sterility and everything else. So it's all the stuff that we in-house.
You mentioned that to reduce that, you are outsourcing to online pharmacy prescriptions versus carrying a bunch of drugs. Are you not losing revenue like that or profit?
Yeah, well, this was on advice of somebody else on their phone call. We looked at it, and we're not losing. I don't think we aren't losing revenue over it, and we're also a lot more efficient. So that was a big thing for us to take on. We've been doing it for a couple of years now. It was, oh my God, we are giving them a script for $40 for vet med, and where we could be making 120 or 140 at the time. But we've got a really good system in place. So we see the client, we take the blood test, we start them on the long-term meds, and they're rebooked in for that next test, whether it's 3 months or 6 months. We write them a script, and that goes to the online pharmacy. One of the biggest headaches and one of the inefficiencies I have in my vets is we still have medication orders we've got to fill on a daily basis, and it's a pain in the backside because you're looking back, you're checking them. Have we got the strength right? Have we got the dosage right? Have they been in the clinic recently? And it's so much better not having that.
Fantastic.
So, the data I've actually seen here is practices are more profitable when they start to outsource. If you look at the time, if you actually add up the true cost of selling an item, by the time you order it, someone's got to order it, then you've got to unpack it, put it on the shelf, got to sell it to a client, they've got to pay the FOS fee. When you build all those things in, it's around about $5 per item you need to add on it. When you start throwing that on lower dollar value, like lower margin items, something that's marked up and say you got a 25 or 30% markup, by the time you throw that in, a lot of the time you're barely profitable. And so what we've found, when we've looked at the data across all practices and we have a look at turnover, what we're finding on average, the practices are actually turning over more, even though they're reducing that stuff. And why? Because the money's in the service. So we're going, focus on that, be good at that. Here's the other thing. Those clients know they go online and get it for cheapest chips anyway. And if they find it rather than you tell them, what do they come back and say? Fucky, that's charging a fortune, rip off, blah, blah, blah. So by leading, which you guys have done well, Louise, you've actually said, hey, I've found a cheaper way for you guys to access this.
And we give them the option. We've still got some people that want to come in the clinic, but a lot of our food's online now too. And I mean, at the moment, we've identified we're just not busy enough. Our vets are not busy enough. But by having less vets when they're away or having more people in the door, if I can free up half an hour of a vet's time so they can get another 1.5 consults in as opposed to doing 6 medication orders, that's a much better use of their time.
Yep.
So
average transaction value, is that transactions for your vets only, or does that include somebody coming in to buy?
Ours includes everything from a sale of one wormer to a TPLO. Every single invoice is generated in the clinic. But as I was saying, when I look at my practice management, the software figures, I know the dashboard does it slightly different around visit.
What it will do, so with your average transaction value, you'll actually get 2 different ones. One will be an all practice. So when you look at the homepage of the dashboard, it'll be all practice, and it's counting wormers and stuff that your nurses do. What it does under the staff performance, it's anything that goes under that vet's name. So anything that's invoiced under that, that's how it's calculating that.
The numbers that you were saying we should aim for, that is vet transaction, right?
So where I was talking about the staff performance, that was per vet transaction,
And you want that to be what, 350, Sam, for vets and 300 for ATV overall?
Yeah.
Is that where we're sort of at?
Yeah, we were sort of at a 250. When we started here, it was over about 200. There it was 220, now it's 250. Now most of our group are sitting at 255, something like that. So as an all-clinic ATV. So now we've moved it to 280.
This is Australia specific?
Australia, New Zealand,
Okay, I'll stop recording.